Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask Miss Jai Live. Today, I'm going to be talking about engaging, how to engage, how to hire, and how to retain trans and non-binary talent and a trans and non-binary workforce. So stick around and learn a couple of tips, especially if you're in a position of hiring or looking for talent for your organization. A couple of tips on how you can make sure that you are including gender expansive folks in the hiring and retention of that workforce. Hi, everyone. My name is Miss Jai. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. I am the host of Ask Miss Jai Live. If you are catching this live, please put a hashtag live in the comments below. If you are catching this on the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay. Let me know what you think about today's video. Today, I'm going to be talking about ways that you can engage trans and non-binary for your positions and for your organization, how you can hire and some tips to hiring gender expansive folks, and how you can retain trans and non-binary talent within your workforce. One of the reasons why I'm talking about this is because oftentimes when I have worked in healthcare or public health agencies, there have been a lot of questions that have come up around how to navigate and bring in trans and non-binary folks into the work that you're doing. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the recommendations that I have made to healthcare and public health agencies, but I think a lot of this is also transferable across multiple agencies and multiple workforces as well. And part of the reason why we're focusing on gender expansive folks in the workforce is because one of the big recommendations when you're trying to serve trans and non-binary folks is that folks of similar identities are reflected in the staff that are serving those communities, that we are more likely to engage with services, especially around our health, when we see ourselves reflected in the workforce that's present. So I'm really excited to be providing this. Please stick around and learn a couple of things. Please share this with your HR and development folks as well, because I think this will be a helpful tool for folks who are looking to expand the diversity and inclusion of the workforce. So the first thing I want to say is that when it comes to engaging trans and non-binary folks for our positions, we want to make sure that we are going to where transgender and non-binary people live, work, play, and rest in order to source applicants. So what this means is that we are taking our job postings when we have those available, that when we are looking for folks to fill our open positions, that we are being intentional about where we are marketing those positions, that we are bringing opportunities to where trans and non-binary people already are. So for example, we're bringing opportunities for employment to organizations that serve trans and non-binary folks. We're bringing it to LGBTQ centers. We are making sure that if there are community events taking place that focus on trans and non-binary communities, that we are bringing those job opportunities there as well, or that we're posting them in places on message boards or job boards that are frequented by gender expansive folks. So we want to make sure that we are going to the places where trans and non-binary people are in order to source talent and to let folks know that we are encouraging active application to the organization as well and for that job position. So we have to go where trans people are if we want to engage trans people around employment with our organizations. The second around engaging trans and non-binary communities is we also have to show investment in the trans and non-binary community. And what I mean by showing investment in the trans and non-binary community is that we're taking the time as an organization to go to the places where trans and non-binary people are celebrating, where trans and non-binary community events are taking place, and that we're showing our investment in the community and centering the community and not just trying to extract labor from the community. So what this can look like, for example, again, from the background that I have in healthcare and in public health, is it might be that we go as organizational representatives to Trans Day of Remembrance or Trans Day of Visibility events, that we are showing up to events that are celebrating Trans History Month, or Trans Awareness Week, which are going to be happening in November. And so we're showing up to these spaces and we're showing up to these places to show our support for the community and also our investment in the community as an organization and as staff of that organization, as opposed to only reaching out to trans and non-binary communities when we want to uh, answer a needs assessment or do research on the community, or strictly because we're looking for employees, right? So we have to show our investment in the community, because part of that will also show trans and non-binary members of our community that we are committed to being engaged, and that we are invested in the community overall. So being involved in those community events is a really important way to build rapport with our gender expansive community at large, so that we also develop a reputation as an organization for being engaged in the community and going beyond a transactional relationship with the community as well. So those are a couple of tips on how you can engage trans and non-binary communities around talent acquisition. So going where people live, work, play, and rest, and showing investment in the trans and non-binary community. We also want to talk a little bit about hiring practices and some improve our hiring practices to make sure that we are sourcing trans and non-binary talent. The first is that we're around a hiring practice. We want to make sure that we include our non-discrimination policies in our job descriptions, and that our non-discrimination policies include gender identity and gender expression. It's one of the first things that I look for when I'm looking for a job or when I'm looking at an organization or a position, is what the non-discrimination policy says, and if it includes gender identity and gender expression. If it doesn't include those, then it becomes unclear whether or not this will be an affirming environment for me to work in, or whether or not I'll have to closet in order to get a job or get an interview. And so we want to make sure that it's clear where we stand with our non-discrimination policy. The other piece of this is we want to make sure that in our job descriptions, we include some sort of caveat about the who we're encouraging to apply for the positions as well. And so I'm going to read the one that I include in my job descriptions. It was sourced from the Trans Legal Defense Fund, which I really appreciated their language around this. And so I just modified it for my purposes and to fit within the structure for my job description specifically. And so at the end of every job description, I include my non-discrimination policy, and I also include Toadhenge Consulting, which is my business, acknowledges that applicants from groups that have been historically marginalized are less likely to apply for positions unless they feel that they meet 100% of a job's description's qualifications. We understand that the ideal candidate might not completely meet the criteria listed in our job descriptions or be equally proficient in each area. If your background and skills are a close match for an open position, you are strongly encouraged to apply. We especially encourage potential applicants who are impacted by Toadhenge Consulting's work to submit their application. And then I continue it by saying, Toadhenge Consulting is an equal opportunity employer. Black people, Indigenous people, people of color or BIPOC, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex people, women, immigrants, people with disabilities, including those living with HIV, formerly incarcerated people, and people with lived experiences of poverty are all strongly encouraged to apply. So you can take a portion of that language. You can take all of that language if it resonates with you. But we want to include something in the job description that makes it clear to folks that they are encouraged to apply and that their expertise, their lived expertise and lived experiences are valuable to the work that we are doing, and providing new or alternative perspectives to than what we have previously provided. And so this is a way that we can include that information. I know that when documentation or a job description includes both a non-discrimination policy around gender identity and expression, and also a specific ask inviting folks to apply, that I am more likely to apply, and that also members of the community and my trans and non-binary siblings are more likely to apply. One tip on the hiring process. The other tip kind of fits into what I was just mentioning, which is this idea that we are looking for perspectives that are alternative, or that are going to add new perspectives to the work that we are doing. And so this is kind of the idea between or the difference between cultural add versus cultural fit when we are trying to hire folks for our organizations. So cultural fit is really looking at, does the person who's applying for a position, do they fit into the culture that already exists within our work? Are they going to mesh well with the staff who are already on board? Do they hold similar values, similar perspectives, etc.? Cultural add is really looking at those who are prospective employees, around what their perspectives are and what they might be able to add to the organization culturally that we don't currently have. So I think both are important for the work that we are doing, because we want to make sure that folks' values are similarly aligned in the talent that we're hiring, that we don't anticipate any initial large conflict that is going to get in the way of the work that we do, etc. But oftentimes when hiring trans and non-binary folks, there's the idea of cultural fit overrides the reality, or the benefit of hiring someone who's going to add culturally to your organization and provide new perspectives on the ways that they navigate the work, on the ways they innovate in the work, the ways that they um, bring in additional information and bring in additional perspectives to the work. So I encourage you to think about, if you're responsible for hiring or interviewing folks, to not just think about how does this person fit within the culture that we have or fit within the culture of our current existing space, but also to think about how they can add culturally to the work or provide new perspectives, provide new ways of doing the work that allows us to grow and be innovative in ways we haven't been in the past. And if you are someone who's trans or non-binary and you are looking for a job, this is also a way that we can talk about what we bring to the work, and how we can add culturally to the work, and bring our own lived experiences and expertise. So it also helps us to show that we are thinking about how we fit within the pre-existing structure culturally for the organization that we're applying for. But it also shows that we are already thinking about how our expertise and our knowledge and the ways that we think about the world and the ways that we problem solve or build out solutions are going to add to the culture of the organization as well. So it essentially helps to highlight some of those gaps for the hiring manager. So those are two tips around hiring, making sure that we include non-discrimination policies that include gender identity and gender expression, that our job descriptions include some sort of caveat or indication encouraging gender expansive people to apply, and that we are thinking about cultural add versus cultural fit, and that we are incorporating aspects of both into the hiring process. When we think about retaining trans and non-binary talent, there are a couple of ways, there's a couple of tips that I have for you as well. Because one of the big things that comes up, especially in the work that I do with healthcare and public health agencies, is there's a really big push for, let's bring in folks who are the community that we serve, but then there's very little infrastructure present in order for those folks to feel supported in the work, and cared for in the work, and invested in in the work. And so we can't just hire trans and non-binary folks and say, okay, we've done our job. We also have to create an environment in a workplace that is affirming and that will lend to retaining trans and non-binary talent as well. So the first thing, or the first tip that I have for you, is that we want to make sure that we are developing affirming policies and procedures within our workplace. And what those policies and procedures can look like are things like name and pronoun policies and procedures. So if I'm being hired on, there might be aspects of the work that require my legal name. So my W-2, my hiring paperwork, what is going to be reported to the government, what is going to be reported for my health insurance. Those are things that might require my legal name. But in all other aspects of the work, what is actually requiring a legal name versus what is requiring the name that I go by? So in the development of my and in the creation of my email address, in my signature block, in my business cards, in the username that I use to log into our computers, right? Am I able to use my current name as opposed to a legal name? Because we know that trans and non-binary people don't always change their legal name or legal gender markers. It's sometimes cost ineffective. Sometimes there's a lot of additional documentation and labor that goes into changing those things, right? So how can we make that, how can we create policies and procedures that are going to be affirming and supportive? We also want to look at like pronoun policies and procedures, right? So what is the expectation of how we will treat one another as colleagues? Do we have expectations on the way that we communicate with one another to ensure that we're using the correct name and the correct pronouns, and that there is a way for us to address that, and protections for us as employees to be able to address that. But beyond name and pronouns, some of the other policies and procedures that could be in place are things like having all gender facilities available to your staff. If you don't have all gender facilities available to your staff, then having a clear policy that folks are able to use facilities based off of their gender identity, not necessarily based off their gender expression or their legal gender marker. Making sure that we have some sort of policy and procedure in our workforce around how we will support someone who's transitioning on the job. So, who will disclose to staff that someone is transitioning or going by a different name or pronouns? Is that something that the staff member who is going by the new name and pronouns will disclose? Is it something the supervisor will disclose? Is it something the supervisor will support the person in disclosing to whom they feel is appropriate to disclose to? How do you go about the minutia of that, right? So if someone's going by a new name in the workplace, what are the steps that you then take to change an email or change business cards or change a door placard? So having a policy and procedure in place to support folks who are transitioning in the workplace shows trans and non-binary folks who are not only applying for positions, and being hired into positions, that they are valued and affirmed, but it also helps to retain trans and non-binary employees as well. So those are some examples of the affirming policies and procedures. There are a ton of other ones as well. So if you have questions about specific policies or procedures, please feel free to put them in the comments. And I'm happy to provide additional examples as well. Or if you've heard of other policies and procedures that were really affirming for you, or that you thought were really well done or well crafted, please share those in the comments as well, because I'd love to hear about those. And then the final tip that I have for you today is around retaining a trans and non-binary workforce, is around professional development and upward mobility. So we know from the US Trans Survey from 2015, as well as from a bunch of research that's been done through the Movement Advancement Project and Fenway Health and um, a variety of other experts, that economic stability and employment specifically, are that there are disproportionate challenges that trans and non-binary people face in economic stability and in employment, which includes being denied opportunities for upward mobility, being denied promotions, being removed from positions, or forcibly retired, or being forced out of positions, or having to leave a job because of the experiences of discrimination or being mistreated, or a variety of other things. So these are all on top of what folks would normally experience in a workplace, right? This isn't a good fit, etc. But what that results in is that, by and large, a lot of trans and non-binary folks do not have access to professional development, and may have a lot of assumptions made about where we are at professionally in terms of our ability to respond effectively to emails or navigate conflict in the workplace or explore time management, et cetera, right? So when we are hiring trans and non-binary folks into our organizations, we also have to have a plan in place on how we are going to provide supervision support and managerial support, and how that will incorporate professional development for trans and non-binary employees. And really, we should be doing this for all employees, right? We should have a way to invest in the professional development of all of our staff. And so I would highly encourage you to start thinking about that investment and what professional development looks like. And I've seen it done in a variety of ways. So like earmarking funds so that every employee has a certain amount of funds for professional development opportunities. So it could be training, it could be technical assistance, it could be a variety of things, right? But allowing staff to be self-deterministic in that, and providing support to supervisors and managers on how to manage and supervise cross-culturally and how to manage and supervise and support folks in their professional development. One of the things that I see a lot in healthcare and in public health is that there's not a lot of training or guidance on how to manage and how to supervise. And so we also want to make sure that professional development is occurring for our managers and our supervisors so that they understand the techniques and the ways to be an effective supervisor that is both holding folks accountable, but also providing for individual growth as well. And that takes me to the next piece of this tip, which is upward mobility. Oftentimes, especially in the environments that I've worked in, healthcare and in public health, trans and non-binary folks have filled sort of the direct service roles, so a lot of the entry-level positions. But when it has come to creating spaces for upward mobility, there's less opportunities for folks to experience upward mobility into management or C-suite or higher up decision-making positions. And so one of the things that I would encourage folks to think about is how are we supporting and encouraging upward mobility for trans and non-binary folks, especially when trans and non-binary folks infrequently see ourselves in those positions. So, for example, when I started working in the public health field in 2011, so when I started working in the public health field, my 5-year goal was to work in sexual health education with LGBT youth. That was where I saw myself, and I was like, this is what I really want to do. It was an entry level position. And once I started working in the field, I was in an entry level position doing that work. So I was really fortunate to be able to have hit my 5-year goal early, but I didn't really know where to go from there because I had never seen folks like myself in management, in supervision, in upper management, in executive positions, right? And so part of upward mobility is making sure that we are providing that structure and support for professional development around how to supervise, how to manage, so that the folks that we are encouraging or directing through the organization and increasing responsibility in the organization are supported, but also so that um, we have the opportunity and are intentional around how we are building folks up in the organization as well. So there's a couple of ways that looks, but really what we're trying to get to is how to retain trans and non-binary folks in our workforce, because we also know that, as we've talked about already, there's going to be cultural there are going to be new perspectives and new innovations, that we are showing investment in our trans and non-binary community by providing professional development opportunities and upward mobility. We're showing economic stability and providing for employment and economic stability, right? So there's lots of ways that this helps to address a lot of the key pieces that we've already talked about in engaging, hiring, and retaining a trans and non-binary workforce. And if you'd like to learn more about ways that you can support trans and non-binary folks in the workforce, also economic stability and employment, me and a colleague of mine, Zami Tinashe Hemingway, just co-hosted the first ever CDC YouTube series called Social Determinants of Health, and we're focusing on employment and economic stability for the first season, specifically for trans and non-binary communities. So if you're interested in learning more about that, it's over 4 episodes. The first episode just dropped. The next episode will be dropping next Friday. If you're catching this in the replay, there's a good chance that it's already dropped. But go ahead and check out the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and you should be able to find it under our collaborative videos. But I'm very excited about that. It's the first of its kind with the CDC. It's a collaboration between Ask Miss Jai and Denver Prevention Training Center. And myself and my colleague Zami have the opportunity to really go in depth around how trans and non-binary people experience economic stability in the United States and employment, and some of those disparities and how that ends up impacting our health and well-being. So again, things for us to keep in mind if you are someone who is in charge of hiring, if in charge of retaining employees, or if you are a trans or non-binary person who yourself is looking for employment. It's a great way for us to learn kind of what is going on in our community and how we can address those needs as well. So I hope this has been helpful. If you're just catching this live, go ahead and put a hashtag live in the comments. If you're catching it on the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay. I'd love to hear what you thought of these recommendations, or if you have additional recommendations on engaging, hiring, and retaining trans and non-binary talent in your in your workplace. I am very excited to be here again. My name is Miss Jai. I am the host of Ask Miss Jai. I'm going to be coming here every Friday talking about a different topic. So please feel free to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you have the opportunity to learn more about how you can support the health and well-being of trans and non-binary communities. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for joining for today. I'm grateful for your time and your energy. I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. We are also on Instagram, or I am also on Instagram and on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me there as well. And as always, thank you for taking the time to invest in the health and well being of trans and non binary communities. Until next time.